Well, hello and welcome everyone to the Business Revolution podcast and to my third series of Changing Conversations, which I'm really excited today to be joined by Craig Polsfuss, who's a psychologist all the way from Minneapolis and was also one of the first generation psychologists who was trained with Sydney Bank. So I'm really excited to speak with him today. And he's going to be sharing his thoughts on how to simplify and empower your mind and business. So without further ado, I'm going to just hand over, I think, to Craig. I'm kind of hoping that I'm just going to be able to just hand over to you and you're just going to impart with us all of your wisdom today. But maybe...
you just open up that. Just good luck. We'll see what happens.
Absolutely. But it's so lovely to have you here, and maybe just to start with your thoughts about, well, how can we simplify our minds and our business and our lives? It sounds such an unachievable thing, but
well, once we understand it from the perspective of the three principles, which most of your viewers and listeners know about, it's a matter of clarity. And a couple of things occur to me right off the bat to just clarify for us and the audience that will help clarify. One is something we were just chatting about just before we recorded, and that's, many people seek a coach or a teacher to tell them what to do. And to me, that's legitimate in certain kinds of subject matter. And what we bring, who have an understanding of the three principles, is a perspective of a whole nother dimension. So in my work with people and business leaders, I make a distinction between the horizontal and the vertical, and that I can do the horizontal is the nitty gritty day-to-day stuff you do, go to, have a website, don't have a website, but that's not where my expertise, that's not my forte, and I don't want it to be, because the power and leverage of having a vertical understanding is so amazing that much or most of the vertical will just kind of fall in place. And if you need to go get, technical advice from somebody, it'll be obvious and you'll go do that and it'll all flow and fall into place. So what the vertical offers is not so much a how-to, although there's some implication there, it's a perspective. I just offer my best perspective to my clients. And oftentimes that will involve talking about thought and about consciousness and about mind. And I happen to be one of the, frankly, only three principles facilitators who also has a background in neuroscience. So I can bring in not only knowledge of the brain and how it functions and how the three principles in the brain correlate, but there's actually been a methodology developed that helps us work on the brain side with the physiology of the brain versus the psycho-spiritual side with the three principles. So that may just get woven in, or I may come to that later in the discussion. So the two things I wanted to clarify at the beginning is I'm not looking so much with my clients to tell them what to do as much as to offer the perspective I have as I listen to them and what they need and what they want and how they understand or don't understand how they are sculpting their experience and their outcomes in life. So it gets really, really simple in reality. In terms of conceptually, it can be simple too, but to arrive there can be a process of, I'm thinking of when we were little children in the early grades of school, and the teacher, we've kind of got it. Oh, I'm in school to learn stuff, and I learned it from my teacher. Now the teacher says, I'm going to teach you arithmetic. And we go, arithmetic, okay. And she says, we're going to start with addition. We go, okay, addition. How many of you know about numbers? Oh, I know about numbers. And he or she starts talking about numbers. And little by little, I get the idea of addition, and I start to count on my fingers and toes, right? Mm. That's the horizontal, that's the rational mind, and that makes sense. And then the teacher gives me a challenge to add some numbers that are beyond my fingers and toes. And I start to get the idea, oh, the teacher is trying to get me to understand something that's legitimate, but I don't get it. But so there might be frustration, there might be excitement, there might be whatever there is, but with more exposure and experience and openness and trying, pretty soon the principle of addition clicks for us. Yeah. And then, oh my gosh, now it's simple. I can apply this principle to any numbers. And then we think that's great and we're all good and teacher's proud of me, I'm proud of me, parents proud of me. And then the teacher says, now we're going to learn subtraction. Yeah. Or even further, we're going to learn algebra. And it's like, what? Yeah. You know, there's always greater levels of understanding. But when you get the learning process, that really helps. It's like, then you're not so hard on yourself and you can just sit back and relax and go, okay, what, as the listeners to this listen to us, they can maybe be not listening from what am I supposed to do as much as, well, what's the perspective they're offering? Where's the ring of truth, or what's makes sense about what they're saying? And then once that strikes, then let your system show you the implications for your life, rather than, okay, now what do I do with those? And now, because see, that keeps you stuck in the rational analytical thinking, which I do not put down. There's tremendous value in that, but when we misuse it or rely on it when we shouldn't, then now we've just constrained our ability. And when we realize, wait, we have another source of intelligence in us that's way more creative, and we get it through insight, right? Insight, and we can't create insights. All we can do is create the conditions for the insight to happen, which is an open, listening, interested kind of state of mind. And then the odds of the insights happening, of popping, start to go up. Yeah. And then the more you learn that, see, here's the brain side. Your brain is wiring that in. It's creating neural pathways that are now become more and more a part of your new normal. So you're literally taking psychospiritual information, this is how incredible human beings are, and turning it into physical matter in the brain, and then that, of course, affects the functioning of the whole body, and embodying more and more wisdom, power, divinity, if you want to go use that kind of language, universal truth and power, and that being formless, but taking form in us. It's unlimited, and there's that feeling, and I'm feeling it now talking to you, and the quality of your listening is pulling it out of me. There's both a thrill, a zest for life in that, but there's also this deep sense of peace and confidence and all is well. And no matter what's happening in my world of experience, I'm okay and I'm going to be okay because I'm realizing I am not my experience. My experience is thought taking form, but I'm that consciousness within which that experience is arising. So it comes and goes, but I remain just fine the whole time. Okay.
Wow. I just love that. I could just listen to that all the time. But what I really could hear very deeply is there's so much hope. So much hope. I mean, I was just reflecting back, and I know we spoke a bit before, and I said to you, I was a really slow learner when it came to the principles. Like I had to be dragged through kicking and screaming, you know, because I was very tied into this idea that I needed to be fixed, that my brain was so wired in a certain way that I needed somebody to go in there and rewire it for me. You know, I didn't believe that I had the capability to rewire it myself, you know. And I'm smiling because, and I know that listening on a podcast, you see this, and I'm smiling because there was a time when I never smiled. I just, it was really unusual for me to smile. I mean, I just went around with a very kind of like miserable kind of looking face. And I would never have imagined that I could have so much joy and hope and love and compassion in my heart, because there was a time when there wasn't. And you've just explained what happens kind of physiologically so beautifully. And to know that you can rewire your brain yourself is incredible, isn't it?
With not just from your rational mind and your ego, but from your greater intelligence, or I would call it higher consciousness, that we have, there's a way to tap into that higher intelligence that will you rewire your brain by letting it rewire it for you.
Wow. Yeah.
And so when that's happening, it feels super simple, but to try to think it out and explain it and describe it is so complicated. And I think I'm pretty good. I'm lucky that I've been in this so long that I can kind of make it simple for people in terms of the description. And let me show you more hope here, as long as you triggered that in me. It's not that we get this new brain, you know, new wired in, but we are evolutionary beings. We are not made to just kind of go, God, it's all good now. No, then there's, like I said, with algebra next, there's more and more and more. And that's not there to torture us. That's there to pull us into our ultimate potential, which seems to be endless. It's been proven that, you know, there was a time not too long ago that in science they said the brain is the one organ that can't heal and you know, repair itself. And now we know, no, there's neuroplasticity, and we can wire and rewire the brain. But there's also a term called neurogenesis, which is the generation of new neurons. Well, they've proven that the human brain does that at least into the 80 years old.
Wow.
Yeah. So our brain has the capacity to continue to create new neurons and then new neural pathways. And we're always doing that. But what is the intelligence or instructions that we're drawing on? Are we building new neural pathways that reinforce the old depressed life? Or the nature of life is to give us a fresh, full moment full of unlimited potential. When we can just see the obvious truth of that, that alone starts to just wake us up and refresh us and go, oh my gosh. And to whatever degree you see that, you experience fresh start, you experience forgiveness, because life isn't holding it down on you. You are in your head, right? And it's like, oh my gosh, if I can just really see the truth of the true nature of life, and that means my true nature, and that includes how I am a result of, and participate in the experience I'm calling my life. We start to wake up to the two worlds of that Sid Banks said we need to learn to live in two worlds simultaneously, and the best of two worlds. And one of my favorite, I'll mix my metaphors here. We realize on the one hand, we're just a drop in this amazing ocean, huge, huge, huge ocean where each drops in that. And at the same time, there's nothing in each of us as drops that is not the ocean. So the whole ocean is in the drop. And now to live more and more conscious of that, some people don't know, in Sid's early days, he would say things like, we are all things. We are all things. And he would just get all excited about it. And then I think a lot of people he saw couldn't relate to that. He stopped kind of talking about, but he would say the oneness, he would use the word oneness and stuff. Yeah. But that, gosh, can I really wake up to it, if it's true, or my senses is true, to, oh my gosh, I am the ocean, and at the same time, I'm this drop. Similarly, someone asked Sid once, are you God? And he said, I'm not God, but God I am. He was pointing to the same thing I'm pointing to right now.
Yeah, yeah.
And so then when you're the ocean, it's like, it's all, I call myself often an integral psychologist. It's all integral. It's all one intelligence in this multifaceted expression that's all one expression of one formless energy in form, which Sid also talked about. So it's all me.
Yeah.
Or another way to say it, this might sound contradictory. Oh, it's not me. It's the expression of me in my mind and consciousness. Yeah. So I get to watch this divine unfolding of this divine dream called my life and participate in it and learn how to participate in it fully without identifying with it, without losing sight that, here's another great metaphor. This is the movie, and I'm experiencing what's in the movie, but I'm not in the movie, I'm in the theater. I'm in the theater watching the movie, and in the theater, I'm just fine, no matter what's happening on the movie. But if I'm so absorbed in my consciousness in the movie, I forget that I'm fine. The truth is I'm still fine, but no, I'm not. You know, worst case scenario, no, I have to kill my body. I have to commit suicide to get out of this hellish movie. No, you have to understand what's going on and begin to back up and feel, go within. Feel the part of you that has always been in the theater and will always be. It's never born into form. It's never born fully into time, space, and matter. It pours itself in, and time, space, and matter responds and reflects that intelligence and that pouring in. But because it's infinite, there's always more. There's always more. So there's a dimension in us that is unborn and undying. It cannot die. And the more we know that, there's no room for fear. And if we have fear, we understand it's part of human experience, and it's okay, and it'll come and it'll go, and it's not me. And we stay awake to that more and more because it's being myelinated into our neural pathways.
Yeah. Wow. And that is so empowering, isn't it? Because so often, and when I have clients who come and they're very fearful, or they're very traumatized by their previous, their lives that have happened to them, or their experiences that they've had before, and they'll say, yes, but this happened 10 years ago, or this happened 5 years ago. I've had this experience. And it really does kind of refresh all of that, doesn't it? When we start to understand it, it's like somebody presses the reboot button on us and it says, well, none of that really exists. It only ever exists in our mind.
Right. That's right. Wiped, washed, clean. Another metaphor I often think of is like on a car, the windshield wiper is there. And it's always washing the window clean as long as we have it on. And we do have it on. We are alive. We are breathing. The breath, in a sense, is that fresh start, fresh moment. And not just fresh moment. What part of my passion for this is back to we are evolutionary beings. It's not just fresh moment, but it's a fresh moment that is going somewhere. There's this intelligence evolving the whole thing. 13.8 billion, our true age is 13.8 billion years.
Hey, you're looking good. So am I.
Yeah. And that it's obviously not done. It's still going somewhere. So to go, well, I made this mistake. It's like, that's like you looked at the first grader who's struggling with arithmetic and, you know, hey, most of them are going to learn it. And those that won't, you give them special help. And then those that can't even then they don't need to. There's another way they can be in life, you know?
Yeah. And that's really kind of important to know, isn't it, about every single moment, because, you know, and I'll hold my hands up to this. This is, you know, my experience as well, is that often when we've come to the principles, we think, oh yeah, well, I should have got it by now. Why am I still getting sucked into my thinking? Why did I get tripped up last week and I went up in my head, you know, or why did I get in that bad mood and, you know, I said that to whoever. And it's this idea that all of that is okay.
Yes.
And that is just an experience as well.
And it's part of an evolutionary process of got it, don't got it, don't got it, but got a little more.
Yeah.
Got a little more, don't, 2 steps forward, 1 step back, got it. And we're being tuned in many what are called lines of development, intellectual, moral, spiritual, whatever, relational. And it's like this, the universe was burst forth and it's kind of going woof, woof, woof. And as it does, 13.8 billion years later, it's not just a, you know, chaotic mass of energy and matter. It's organized itself and expressed itself in more and more organized and sophisticated ways. And as it does, guess what? Here we are at the leading edge, conscious, alive, free will. And not only can we understand the process of evolution, but this is and will continue to change the human species. We realize we are evolution in the sense that, oh my gosh, and this has been implicit in the 3 principles all along, what we think as individuals and do, we not only experience, that's our personal reality, but we're creating the future for the species. We are choosing the direction of evolution. Mm. And that is both thrilling at where we could go, and extremely, for me, sobering. Like, oh, I don't want to waste my power of creation.
Yeah.
But I don't want to get so serious about it, I make myself ill, right?
No, I don't think that's quite the idea. But it's really exciting. And, you know, even when you think about, you know, how science has developed over the last sort of 100 years, and the kind of the incredible discoveries and things that have happened. I mean, I just think in the, you know, my father died like 14 years ago, and even how technology has changed, and he loved technology. And sometimes I pick up my iPhone and I think, I wish you'd seen this because you would just love this. You know, and I think, what is going to come out in the next 10, 15 years? What solutions are we going to come up with? What creative ideas are we going to have? And that has to do with this huge other intelligence that we are able to access. Yes. In my mind, anyway, it has to do with that.
Yes. And that intelligence we access, would you agree, is in us? It might seem separate from us and we're reaching out to access it, but it's really being uncovered or unlocked from within us. So that means there's inner organic intelligence or technology that Sid put it this way. He said, deep within is a formula for the ideal life. He didn't say ideal life. He said it some other way, but this inner formula or inner organic technology for it all.
Yeah.
And there's where, and this might sound weird to some of your listeners, where, oh my gosh, when I tap into that, I don't have to think anymore. What a relief. Now, of course I have to think, but I'm drawing on a kind of thinking that just comes to me and I flow with it and I trust it, versus I get in there and I grind and I try to stuff my plans down life's throat. And I find when I do it the other way, my life goes way better in terms of my experience and my outcomes.
Yeah. And that's really useful to know, isn't it? I mean, I know we started this by talking about, the leaps and bounds that technology has gone, but even in terms of running our own lives and our own businesses, and we turn to other people, don't we, for their advice, or what do you think might happen in your experience, or do you think this is a good idea? But actually knowing that we have that intelligence within us, that we can trust that ourselves to really sense that next step or that next decision or where to go or whatever is hugely empowering. Well, I found that as an entrepreneur.
Absolutely. As we rise in the level of consciousness in the vertical, we cannot help but bring that into the horizontal, into our daily thinking, our actions, dealing with the consequences of our actions. And there's where the further you go in the vertical, it gets very clear and simple in terms of perspective and understanding. And so what happens in the horizontal, it gets more clear and simple. Now, it may, from the old view, still be just as complicated or more complicated. Oh my God, you invented an iPhone, or you did this or that. But from the psycho-spiritual, it was just the next, I don't know if I want to say the next right thing, the next thing that flowed out of where I had risen to.
Yeah. I think it's easier as well to let go of the outcome, isn't it, of your decision? I know that I found that I've become less attached to the outcome of whatever decision I might make. Even like setting up this podcast, I didn't know whether one person was going to listen to it or whether it was going to go viral. I wasn't attached to that in any way. It just felt like the next right step to do.
That's right. For its own sake. It's in your heart, it's in your mind, it's in your inspiration to do it, then you do it. And that may seem like a very small, isolated action, but when you understand the true nature of life, that we are all things, no, you're radiating that to all, not only all of humanity, but to the whole universe. And I know this might sound like new age woo-woo, but these things are being proven psychologically. And it just makes sense when you know the nature of that. This whole thing is a big, like I think Sid was one who called it a big ball of conscious energy. Well, and it's all one thing. It's all one ocean, and we are that ocean, but we're showing up right here now as one of the drops.
Yeah.
But we're not separate from the ocean.
Yeah. Yeah. It just, in a practical sense though, I mean, for me, it just made life so much more straightforward and simple, because I didn't get caught up in the minutiae of, well, is it going to work? Is it not going to work? How many people am I going to have to talk to? Is that going to be stressful? What about the organization? I didn't get sucked into that because it didn't make any sense to me to do that.
Right.
It just made sense to kind of just follow the nudge. And I find that so often in so many different aspects and decisions of my business, if it feels like a good idea and it occurs to me, rather than me grinding it out, it just seems to fit. It might work out, it might not work out, but it seems like a logical next step. Does that seem right?
Absolutely. I'm reminded of I've gathered a lot of metaphors through my life. Yeah. Another metaphor that I find really useful that fits with that is that life is like at least life in the horizontal is like a connect the dots game. that, you know, you can connect a few dots and go, why is my life going this way? And you don't see the big picture. But then the time comes where you start to see, or you do see the big picture. But what you're saying, and what I would agree with, is, well, what's important isn't necessarily that I must see the big picture right now. What's important is I know the dot I'm on, I know the next dot I need to go to, and then I go to it.
Yeah.
And then I will, and just trust, okay, now that I'm here, maybe I went straight forward here and another dot straight forward. And then all of a sudden, and I start to get the idea, well, all the dots are going to go straight. And all of a sudden I can't find another dot straight forward. And I look around, finally I see one way off to the right. And I go, well, the feeling's right. Okay. And I go there. And what that did was it got me around a mountain that I couldn't have gone around otherwise. Right?
Yeah. I love that. Yeah, that's right. And you don't. I mean, how often, you know, I know I've looked back on my life and some kind of random decision that felt right at the time turns out to be an integral step that I needed to take, but I didn't know that until several years later. And I think, oh, that's right. That's why I did that really bizarre thing. Oh, well. And so that really helps simplify. I mean, I wonder, you know, as you're here, and I really want to pick your brains about this stuff now. A lot of people who come to me particularly are really faced with a lot of stress, experiencing burnout, or they're heading towards burnout. You know, they're trying to maybe they're getting their business off the ground, or they're juggling a business and they're working at the same time, or they have family commitments and things like that. And they're really stuck on that kind of horizontal. What would you say to them as maybe a useful kind of first thing? I don't want to say step or how to, or because I know it's not about that, but I just wondered if you might be able to speak to that for a bit.
Well, I'm going to answer two things there. First is in terms of you weren't asking this explicitly, but what's the first step with a client? And if there's a first step with a client, I'd have to say you just connect with them, you listen to them, and then that will reveal the next step or the first step with them, right? Which is fun versus, oh God, what if I don't see it? It's like, no, that's fun. And that can be explained more, but I would ask them to consider a perspective I would share. And hear me through, challenge it, let's discuss it. It may take 10 minutes, it may take a number of sessions. And I would make the distinction between the horizontal and the vertical. And I would explain that their experience of stress has to do with being in the horizontal. And the more you're in the horizontal and don't even know about the vertical, you think that's all there is. The horizontal is your human experience. The vertical is your level of awakeness or consciousness, not only to your human experience and how it's created, but to what Sid called the dimension before thought, the you in the theater that's never in the movie. And the more a person, even getting that conceptually, can be very useful. But then when you start to get glimpses of it and feel it and notice, Sid would call it the nice feeling of getting in touch with that. That's why he said, if you're getting a nice feeling and listening to me, you're getting it. It's you're reflecting inside to the you that's always been here in the theater and going, oh yeah, I'm here, you know. But then now it's an experience in the movie. Oh, but now it's part of your movie. It's not just somewhere back there. Now it comes into the horizontal, and because of how it works in the brain, it gets established more and more through a trial and error, back and forward evolutionary process. So I would try to explain this and basically say, you know, there's a way out. Now, it just occurred to me, I may go about this a whole different way. I may ask them, what is their understanding of their stress and where it comes from? And if they say, well, it's my work, or it's my schedule or this or that, I might ask them, well, if you had days where you had the same schedule and you had the same conditions, but you weren't stressed, they'll say yes if they're honest. If I have enough rapport, will they be honest? And then I go, well, how do you explain that? It's because the misperception of the horizontal is that it's an outside-in created experience. The outside creates my experience. The more I go vertical, I realize, no, it's inside out. I'm creating, or more accurately, my mind is creating this experience. So it's just a particular perspective I'm having at the moment. And how many perspectives are possible in this moment? Oh, infinite. Well, you think in infinite, there might be one that could work better for you?
Yeah.
And then they'll get reflective, right? And it might occur to them, oh my gosh.
Yeah. I think that is so useful on so many levels, And what occurred to me as well is how you share really openly how it really depends on the client as to how you kind of unravel this. Because I think that's really useful to hear. Because that's certainly my experience. I never deal with different clients in the same way. It just depends on the client. It kind of turns up, where they are and where the conversation leads. And I think that's really interesting to hear. But also what I think is useful to tease out is the client so often gets to the answer themselves when they start to realize.
Yes.
And we go back to this kind of self-writing mechanism, that this great intelligence is always pointing us in the right direction for us to kind of wake up to that.
Right. So I'm, as a coach or therapist or teacher, aligning with that in them and pointing to that. And with the combination, the odds go up, they'll see it. Like in one sense, I never waver in what I do. I'm always aiming for the vertical. But how I do it in the horizontal is totally creative. What comes to mind is I've got a client, my one client that has seen me for 20 years.
Wow.
And it's not because she's, still depressed. It's because she gets so much from the sessions, right? But this is so fascinating. I swear, for 20 years, she's talked 90% of the sessions. And all I do is listen, and I'll give a little here and there. Her whole life has changed. She's 20 years sober now. She's married when she never thought she would be. She changed her career from law to being a pastor in a church, of all things, and it's just she was diagnosed with diabetes, and within a few months went off the meds because she got herself off nutritionally. She took care of it. I mean, just all these amazing things. But the sessions with her are pretty much, I'm listening and I'm really with her, and she's doing, and it gives her a chance to hear herself.
Yeah, and I think that's so important, isn't it? I mean, I have clients who come and see me every month for that purpose, that it gives them the opportunity to just come from the horizontal where their heads seem really very full to a chance to just kind of almost kind of offload. And at the end of the offloading, it's as though the mind clears, and then they have the ability to listen.
Right.
And I have to do very little during those sessions apart from provide the space to listen and be connected.
Just stay present and care and be responsive. And that's what you do anyway. It just turns out that your response is nonverbal versus verbal.
Yeah. And I like as well, I think there's maybe this is my thinking, but so much in the therapy world of, it'll take 2 sessions, it'll take 6 sessions, you'll feel better in 2 months. And what I love is that this is almost like a constant enlightening. You know, we're always learning, we're always seeing something new, we're always exploring, and there's always more to see. And yeah, we might get over one like horizontal thing that was tripping us up, but there's but the more we stay in that conversation, the more we kind of see about the nature of life. I don't know if you have anything to talk about that, but that was
sure. That's what I meant when I said we're evolutionary beings.
Yeah.
There's always more, and it's evolutionary. Sid said there's infinite levels of consciousness, right? And that's been my experience, and each level grounds me more in that health, that true identity, and at the same time fuels and energizes my inspiration for opening to and embracing more and letting that evolve me even more.
Yeah.
Do we have time for me to just there's something about that I want to talk about the brain?
Yeah, absolutely. Go for it. Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Go for it. Yeah.
Because this just keeps hitting me, and I think, you know what? Some of your listeners will really like this. So Sid said the mind energizes the brain. And that's my observation and experience too. And by the mind, we mean universal mind, right?
Yeah.
Not personal mind. Okay. So the way most 3 principles students go about getting more mind, right? More intelligence, more clarity, more wholeness, more divinity, whatever language they use, is by listening to these kind of conversations, engaging in them themselves, reading, whatever. And that's all very powerful and life-changing. But very few, if any, address the physiological aspect, and particularly the brain. I think a few here and there are doing that, but I don't see many. And so I just want to try to articulate this, and it's just so exciting. Mind energizes the brain. Now let's take that from Sid talking about the form and the formless are the same energy in two different disguises, or the formless pours itself into form and manifests as our personal and shared experience. Okay, so and I kind of described it earlier, mind energizing the brain is the spiritual energy of mind coming in and activating, taking the form of the brain and activating response in the brain that becomes new neurons, neurogenesis, and then that intelligence organizes the new neurons, or all neurons, in a way to serve us, right? So it creates new neural pathways that we feel, embody, benefit from, and then build on to go further in our evolutionary gift of life experience. So, but what this says is, and what it's my thrill to have stumbled across and I'm a part of, there's a neuroscience methodology that has studied this, and as a result has found a way to go into the brain, and I don't mean with probes or anything, but to use the intelligence of the body, mind-body, in a way to open this pathway more. This pathway from mind to brain where it's energizing is, for lack of better words, it's constricted or kinked, like a hose gets kinked. And that's all our insecure and old thinking that's still stuck there, and it's embodied in the system. Well, it has a way to physiologically go in and open that up and clear that up so that more of that mind intelligence energy can come in and awaken, inform, evolve the brain and all the brain's capabilities, and especially the higher brain, the prefrontal cortex, which is the most complicated and sophisticated structure in the known universe. 13.8 billion years, and the most highly sophisticated creation is right in the front of our head, or in our brain and right here. And when scientists looked at that a few decades ago and measured it, were able to measure the activity there, they were shocked and called it the silent area, because they said it's only about 5% online. What's the deal? And there's where that whole thing about our using only 5 to 10% of our potential started to be, or our brain's potential started to be popular. So this methodology opens up that pathway to the higher brain that nature designed us to have open. And as a result, the higher brain wakes up more and then wires itself in with repeated use of that methodology. And what I've seen in the clients there is they come to a very clear experiential understanding of the principles, but they don't have the language and conceptual understanding of the principles. So they just walk around more and more kind of a feeling like the outside has less power to make them react. And they're more grounded inside in this nice feeling and this nice consciousness. So when I teach them the principles, they go, oh my God, and that enhances it even more. And they go, God, this gives me a language and I can talk about it more. On the other hand, because I've been in the three principles community so long, I have a desire, and I might even call it a passion, to share what I've come across here with the three principles community, because I know a lot in that community would be open to this. I know a lot wouldn't be, because they don't understand. They're caught in the fallacy of misunderstanding when Sid said, don't mix this with techniques. And that's a whole nother discussion. But there's an understanding of that that's proper, and there's a misunderstanding of that. But I just wanted to get that out, that there's a way that we can work now directly with the brain that, in my understanding, is completely in alignment with the principles and is completely mind-blowing and completely opening more of the potential awakening, health, expression of compassion and love and service to the world, way more than we realize.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's fascinating. So when you say there's like a methodology, and I understand if you don't want to like share your sources, but is it is it like a talking therapy, or is it like an understanding?
No. Well, there's a talking part of it. That's the psycho-spiritual side again. Yeah. And that includes the rational. We have to have something that has to make rational sense to us enough. But because it's integral and works with the brain, it uses a mind-body understanding and technique. So you are probably familiar with there's been these subtle energy pathways in the body that have been known for millennia. And in ancient Chinese medicine, they call them meridians. And they're used in the acupuncture and things. And they're called, what are they called? Subtle energy pathways in whatever, in other systems, prana, or, it talks about prana is the chi, ki, are these different names for this source energy in us that's latent in us and is available and expressive in our lives. Well, if that is constrained, well, then it has a consequence in our lives. If you can open that up, which understanding the principles does, if we had the time, I could explain that how learning the principles actually, rewires your brain.
Yeah.
Well, what if you could go in and directly rewire it, and then you end up in that same understanding, but consciousness without necessarily the same language and conceptualization of it, which would be very, very useful, right? Well, we can. So this will sound too simple, but it is simple. There's a very specific code, let's call it a code of making very precise, specific kinds of contacts on those energy meridians in the body that release that latent energy, direct it through the lower brain to the higher brain. As it goes through the lower brain, the experience is lifelong stress starts to dissipate, because the lower brain is all about protecting us and keeping us safe, but only on a physical survival level, right? It doesn't know about, so as long as we're alive physically, it's under there, mostly under the conscious threshold, going, great, success, keep doing what you're doing and don't change anything.
Yeah.
So it unconsciously tries to sabotage us from any change. Now it's our higher brain that knows, no, we're made for change. So it's able to override it with the kind of understanding the three principles gives, but now also with this more awakened state, it just naturally will it will override it, but more put it in its proper place, because we need the lower brain. So it sends this energy through the lower brain to the higher brain. Lower brain going through it feels like this deep, whole mind-body cleansing and relaxation starts to happen. And into the higher brain, it feels like you're waking up inside yourself to yourself. It's very similar to the profound experiences people have when they get deep insight into the principles and they go, oh, and they can't put it into words.
Yeah. Wow, that just sounds absolutely fascinating. And I love how it's bringing together, which is always fascinated me about the principles, really. It's like it's all linked to all the different ideas that we've had over different thousands and thousands of years, and it all seems to be like all coming together and all kind of culminating in this one understanding of how we can really reach our potential. And you kind of see it with, like, different religions and things like that. You see elements of the principles everywhere, and it seems to me that what you've discovered and what you're working on is almost like the next step of bringing all of that together.
That's how it feels to me, in a way, because it's explicitly bringing in the form with the formless. It's almost like we got too stuck in the formless on the three principles side. But the right understanding of that is, well, don't reduce the principles to something in form. Correct, don't do that. But that doesn't mean exclude the form. And just the same, some people get stuck on the form, do something with the physical. There's a physical technique that will produce the enlightenment, that will produce the what we get in the formless. And that's limited too. It's like the integral approach. Sid didn't use the word integral, but he talked this way, and he used the word oneness, sees the coexistence of both and the relationship of both. And like Sid said, they're both the expression of the same mind, the same intelligence in two different forms, formless and form. So there must be an entry point through the form, and there is, because even if we just stuck with the three principles, in form, we're sitting here talking to each other. We have our bodies in time and space. I closed my door, you closed your door. We have a private environment. We did stuff with the form to create the conditions, to increase the likelihood of benefiting and awakening with what's being offered here. Well, geez, what if you could create the conditions in the brain?
I get that. Yeah, it's about kind of creating that environment, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
And then it even though we work with the body stuff, well, isn't that outside in? No, because we don't say we create that experience. We help the brain take its attention and turn it inside to what's already there. And in doing so, it opens the system and clears the system. So it as well is an inside out system, but it would take kind of a developed understanding to look at that and go, oh, it really is inside out. Kind of looks outside in because you do something on the physical level.
That makes sense to me, because what's occurring to me, I mean, on a very kind of rudimentary level, is like, if we don't eat properly, if we're not sleeping, if we're not hydrated, then our whole experience is different. And we're not as connected, and we don't have this wonderful feeling. We feel awful.
Yes.
We could say it was outside in because I've got to put good food in.
Right.
And I got to sleep.
Right.
But for
and
me,
this is why Sid Banks said, use your common sense. He said, some people would ask him, well, should we go off medications and not use doctors? And he said, I use doctors. They're here to take care of the physical form.
yeah.
So he wasn't, but that's easily forgotten. Dr. Bill Pettit, you're probably aware of him. He's a psychiatrist. He uses psychopharmacology to change clients' brain chemistry to help them function better.
Yeah.
But he rightly does not claim that it creates mental health.
Yeah.
It just creates better conditions in the brain for the health and functionality that's there to come out. Okay, well, that's just treating the symptoms, yeah, and that can be better than not. But that it's partial answer, but it's not the whole answer.
Yeah. You could take it down to a very base level, couldn't you? And say, like if you cut yourself, you don't have to, and the example is that you don't have to think it, or you don't have to say a special mantra to like heal the cut heal. But sometimes you need to create the right environment for that cut to heal. You do have to clean the wound. You do have to put a plaster on it, or you might put some ointment on it or something like that. Or you might
Correct.
take antibiotics. So you're creating the environment for the body to heal.
Exactly.
And what I'm hearing from you, what you're doing is you're creating an environment
yes.
for the body to find it, to rebalance itself.
Yes, and from starting with the brain. Because there are other healing modalities and energy work that kind of would say what you said in terms of we're going to get the body balanced. And I haven't studied those or whatever, but with this one, it's very specific, not only to the brain, but to the prefrontal cortex and higher brain, which to me, it just instinctively and rationally makes sense. Like, that's the most leveraged place to focus there, because that affects, everything. And so,
it's like sorting out the main computer system, isn't it?
Yes.
It kind of starts with it. It makes sense to start with that. I mean, I use the analogy of a cut because I just thought it was a little, it was an accessible analogy. But what I mean is what you're doing is creating the right environment in the brain for the brain to really access.
That's right.
This amazing intelligence in the best way. Yeah. Wow.
And if it's innate to people, there must be many ways around the planet in history and now that to X degree help people do that, whether it's prayer and meditation. Is it at the level of the three principles? Maybe yes, maybe no. I can't claim I've been out there with all of them. I can say without a doubt that the three principles are absolute truth and the most simple, elegant, powerful description of human experience that I've ever come across. But it should open us up to mind energizing our brain and our mind more to all the ways mind can come in and evolve us in even more, bless us even more, bring its power and potential into form as and through us even more.
Yeah, that's amazing. Thank you so much. I've just looked at the time and I could speak with you all evening. Well, evening here anyway. I know it's morning with you. Could talk all day.
Oh, thank you so much. It's been really fun too for my end.
Yeah, thank you. And what I will do is I will put the details of your website on the podcast so that if anybody who's listening wants to learn more and get into contact with you, then they will be able to do that too. So
thanks so much, Andrea.
Yeah, thank you very much indeed. It's been just such a pleasure. Thank you.